rise of a nation, sounds, from a liberated Bantu.
Ikubi Bana Bantu. Mutoto wa Kibantu.
All praises to Sormini na Nini. Umhandler Vana Vermuntu. Barwo, Olgwemazulawini. Barwo, Olgwemazulawini. All praises to Sormini na Nini. Umhandler Vana Vermuntu.
Kembo kembo na tata nzambi, mpungu tulendo yamazulu, sonini na nini somandla, gai murungu mwene nyaga. Yes, it's that time we sit and rightly divide the word of truth. Depending on where you are, Bana Beto, I greet you. Nusiemi beto abumbote bana by solin. Molweni abantuana abangoni. Abantuana babawo weto oswe mazului. Moriega shiana shiangai. Rolere nakenda moyoru. Mpo salama watoto wa Mungu. Today, Bana Beto, we have none other than Bantu King Denim Richards, son of Muntu, Muntu Banankosi, Nkosi Yamankosi Yamazulu, Sonini Danini Somandla, touched by the fire of his fire, Bayete Nkosi.
Siemi, brother, first of all, just Kembo na Tatanzambi Yamazulu. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. May the Mwandan Semi just pour out over us as we have this conversation and, connect with the fellow brothers. So, this is a beautiful thing. And, thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Matondo, the honor is all ours, King brother. So now we're just going to dive right in. How did you come into this truth and when?
I came into this truth actually like towards the beginning of 2021, which, as we know, that it's kind of fits that like prophecy, right, of Genesis 15 and 13. And really what it actually came down to was I was sitting in my office back in the West, in the US, because I grew up in Los Angeles, California, just a little bit south of that. And I was sitting in my office, and one night, I watch YouTube videos and this, on the third, and I'm a big researcher. I've always been a student for knowledge. And so I learned a lot about government and, a lot about the occult, the Illuminati, all these other things. I've been knowing those things for decades. And so one day there's a YouTube video that I came across that it was like, Jesus isn't real. And I remember I was so offended by just that word. I was so triggered by this, like, how could somebody say something like this? So I didn't watch the video. I just closed my laptop and just moved on. But for whatever reason, there was like this tugging on my spirit that was like, just look. And so the next night I kind of like prepared myself and then watched this video. And essentially the video was talking about, like, it kind of opened up with, Jesus isn't real, this, that, and the third. And then like 2 minutes into the video, it's going to like Revelations 1, 14 and 15. Then it's going to Daniel 7 and 9. Then it's talking about Deuteronomy 28. And you're sitting there and like your whole world just kind of like expands, but also implodes all at the same time. But so then I was never really a Christian, if that makes sense. Because the doctrine of Christianity never really like made a lot of sense to me. Like there was just so much confusion, which is by design, right? When we really study it, we understand that it's all by design to be very confusing. But there were so many inaccuracies and things that just didn't sit well with my spirit. But I always was a big proponent of, like, that we had a Messiah, and this and all these other things. So as I'm reading this, especially as we're getting into Deuteronomy 28, then of course you wake up, you search more things, and then you kind of fall into what I call the diet Christianity, which is the Hebrew Israelite, awakening, right? And then once you kind of get into that, that is like the trap among all traps, because that is, you finally have come out of like this, you're kind of like birthed finally into this awakening. And the first bottle that is put into your mouth is kind of like the Hebrew Israelite bottle, and you're just sucking in the formula. And, you kind of just take that in. But then as I was going, I still felt like there's a lot of education. Like, I've got in, it got me really back into the scriptures and reading the scriptures and, doing all those other things. But as I was reading the scriptures, I was like, and watching teachers, there was no spirituality. There was a lot of education, a lot of verse, memorization, but I was like, where is the spirituality? Where is that power that we have when we're talking to the Maleki Congo and doing all of these other things? Like, where is that? It's just so much about wear your fringes, make sure you practice the samba, because if you don't, you'll burn in hell. And I'm like, this is kind of the same thing that I did before. So, I kind of sat with that for several months. And then one day I was listening to an interview, and I kept hearing this guy keep saying Bantu, Bantu, Bantu. And I was like, well, I know that I'm Bantu, but I was like, relax. Like literally as the thing, I was like, we get it, you're Bantu. But then I didn't realize as I was listening, and then all of a sudden they're talking about Tatanzambi, and then they're talking about Yisaya Congo, Kuswa Congo. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what is this an occult? Is this like, what is this? This is like, what kind of witchcraft is this? And so then I remember one of the first videos that I watched after I kind of come into this was Yaya Massa. And he was sitting like on his balcony in Angola talking about like water and about how you can heal with water, this, that, and third. I was like, all right. So I was like, let me just close this off. Like, this dude is not even, I don't even know. And I don't even think I've even told him this. But once I started going, so then I went to, brother Yaya Jonathan, and started, watching his videos, and he's, different energies. Everyone has different energies. And so I was like, okay, listening more, and then I'll go back to Masa, and then go back. And then as I started realizing, I was like, whoa, this is like a whole different level. Like this is what the truth is. If you're talking about the truth, the Bantu truth, this is the truth. You shouldn't have to put a caveat of like, oh, it's the Bantu truth. It's just the truth. And so that's how my awakening kind of came about. It was very sudden, but the Most High had kind of been prepping me because I was always been a giant historian. So a lot of the things that people were still figuring out just with like the occult and, satanic worship. And I had already known about those things a decade before. So I was kind of like able to skip past this. Whereas now my spirit wanted like the true spiritual power of Tatanzambi Amazulu. So that's how I kind of came about. And, now I'm here.
Kembo na Tatanzambi Yamazulu mpungu tulendo sonini na nini somandla gai murungu mwenenyaga. My king, talking of history, you work in an industry, and I don't mince words on Bantu re-education team. You work in an industry that has been used very much to program the mind of the sons of Bantu. Perhaps some insider information.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a very difficult, it's a difficult thing. And I'll be honest, because I've also done unsavory things, when I was in the world. When I say I was in the world, I'm talking about just a couple of years ago, right? And so even for me, as I came into this truth, and the Most High was really refining me, because he had always prepared me for this moment where I'm heading into now. And so by his grace, allowed me to kind of like jumble around in all of the nonsense and still, save me. But you're absolutely correct. The entertainment industry is really geared towards distracting but polluting the mind of the Bantu with the hypersexuality, keeping you in one level of thinking. One of the things that I think is so fascinating, I even heard a brother talk about the other day, was like, we love everything, Bantu people hate everything about slavery except for the Christianity part, and there's a giant, in the entertainment industry, there's a giant agenda that has always been to the Bantu. And so that's been a very interesting way to navigate, if you will. And so part of that for me personally became, even now, right? Like, I've only been in this truth for maybe a year. But then what it did was it was instant. When Tatan Zambi hits you with the Mwanda, it's not like you don't have the earning to be like a dog returning to its vomit. You don't like you abhor those things. Like that's how much the spirit just comes on you. And so one of the things with the entertainment industry, it's been a great mechanism for the control of the mind. And when you can control the mind, it has barriers, it has physical things, right? When you can keep us constantly in lust, keep us constantly in alcoholism, keep us constantly in wanting to smoke weed, constantly chasing money, right? When you do that, it doesn't allow it with the amount of pollution, it doesn't allow for the spirit to come in by the Most High. And so one of the things with the entertainment industry that has been very sorrowful is our people have seen their representations on television be elevated because of a certain doctrine and narrative that they're pushing, whether it's hypersexuality, whether it's about being a thug, being all these other things. And so society has rewarded that type of behavior. And so with the colonialist mindset that comes in, that has had an agenda to suppress the Bantu economically, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, it makes everyone want to chase that narrative, chase that. If I can be successful and provide for my family, if I just become a rapper, if I just become an artist, if I just do this. So even for me now, there's certain jobs that I just won't do. Like there's this thing where as you're waking up, it's not like you have to throw everything away, but you have to understand that you are representing, you're a child of the Most High, you're a Bena Congo. So you have a representation of the Most High. And so the entertainment industry has done a phenomenal job of really constantly blurring this line of making you feel free. But then the moment that you try to express your freedom, you're kind of punished for that freedom, right? So it becomes this self-fulfilling trap where you just imprison yourself. And now the prison has no more walls, but the prisoners still operate within the confines of that prison.
Kimbo, Natata Nzambi. My king, what I love about you is that you break it down. You break it down like it is. Now, let's get to the point where you realize, okay, I am a Bantuan, a Bangon. This is my heritage. This is my spirituality. The transition to the point where you leave the land you have known as your home, all the way to Botswana. Let's talk about that transition. It's a point of interest for many of Banabeto.
Yeah, no, one of the things is as I was waking up, even when I was in the Hebrew Israelite community, or I guess I would say passing through, I was just passing through. I never built a house there. I was renting, but, there was so much, in this time of, Ghana in 2019 had been doing like the year of return. Even one of the actresses that I was working with on a TV series, she actually had gone to Ghana as part of their year of return thing. And it was so amazing, and so one of the things that I wanted to do, of course, was like, when you think about the continent, you think Ghana is all of the continent, right? Like that's literally how you approach it. You're like, there's like Ghana, and then there's like all these other random name countries. So I looked at Ghana, was thinking about maybe I'll go to Ghana and visit or move. I never went to this bit. See, before I answer your question, I want to preface this. I never believed in this doctrine by our people where we do so much talking about, oh, we got to go to the continent and we got to go do this way. But no one's ever going anywhere. They just sit in their homes talking about that that's what they're going to do. And so it's almost like what it says what the Most High is talking about in Revelations, where he's saying that you're neither hot nor cold, and I would prefer you're lukewarm, and I would prefer you to be either hot or cold. And because you're not, I'll spew you out of my mouth. Many of our people, especially when we're talking about these things, there's no real commitment. It's just kind of like, oh, maybe I'll go there on vacation, maybe I'll just go and hang out, you know, and then they come back to the West and they tell everybody about how great it is, but then they also just assimilate right back into what they were doing before they even left to the continent. So I was always of the mindset, like, if it was that amazing, why not just move there? So for me, when I was looking at Ghana, I looked at places in Ghana, then I actually was going to go to Gambia because a lot of our people were going to Gambia. And, you know, I had a real estate agent, I had a lawyer, I had made an offer on a house, like I had done everything. But then something in my spirit was like, just before you make this financial commitment, just keep looking a little bit more. Expand outside of just West Africa, this little sliver. And then I started looking around. I'm like, South Africa, I was like, I never even heard of Botswana, like all these other places. And then I'm looking at some things in Botswana. And it's like, it's a smaller country in population, but in landmass, it's large. And then I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just go there to start. So they weren't open during that time. I decided to come here when they finally did open their borders, but I had already been looking at houses. Like in my spirit, I just make commitments. Like I'm very big on committing. Like if you're going to do something, just go ahead and do it and don't look at a backup plan. So I came to Botswana, all praises to the Most High. You know, right when I was landing off the plane, coming in from Johannesburg, I looked at the soil and I was like, yes, this soil is definitely like, this is us. This is our soil. And that was kind of, you know, the rest was history, really. It was like, you know, I got here, I was literally walking down the street and people would just come to me and be in the fields that I was in the West. Like, oh, I do entertainment here. Oh, I teach at a school of the arts. And people were just coming to me. I didn't put in an application. I didn't do anything. I would literally just be sitting at a restaurant and somebody would just come and say, hey, can I just talk to you for a second? Or walking down the street from my Airbnb at the time. And somebody would stop and ask me for directions. And all of a sudden we're talking and he's like, oh yeah, I shoot documentaries and I do this. And I'm like, oh, that's strange. That's what I do. So to me, within 1 week of me being here, the Most High had said, this is where you need to be. And also it's very, very central to all of our other brothers and sisters on the continent.
And on that very same note, my king brother, it will be a great injustice if we did not talk about the project that you're doing in Botswana. I believe it beats the purpose of what we are trying to achieve as Banabilaka. So my king, perhaps a slice of that cake for Banabeto.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, so, you know, I'm an artist in the West. So one of the things that we're doing here in Botswana is we're, you know, going to be doing a television and film studio here. You know, so I have a nice chunk of land, I guess I would say a hefty chunk of land, where we'll be building studio and building housing. And then also, you know, we're into agriculture as well, you know, doing that. You know, when you come to the continent, you quickly realize that it needs everything, if that makes sense. Like there's not really, and like if you come from the West, if you were to say like, oh, I'll put up an internet cafe, that would never make any sense to have an internet cafe in Los Angeles. Like every place has internet and all cafes and restaurants have internet access and we have unlimited data, right? So an internet cafe doesn't even matter. But then when you come to the continent, you realize like, oh, internet cafe is actually like a major deal. Not everybody has Wi-Fi, but then also not everyone has unlimited data. Like you have to come in, you have to pay for your data, you know? So there's so many ideas. And so I think that if you're not focused, if you're not spiritually focused when you come here, you will just go off in so many different rabbit holes and areas of business that you won't ever get anything done. So for me, one of the things that was important is to lean into my strengths, which I come from the West with, and being able to create quick employment. You know, when you create television and film, outside of the content, you're able to create a lot of jobs from, design and hair and makeup and wardrobe design and building buildings and drivers and, food. So one of the things here is our people do need jobs, and so we can bring people in, 2 or 3 heads of these departments from the West come in and train this next generation here in the arts, because even for us as, Bena Congo, we're very, very passionate people. We're very expressive people. And I don't think that we have to throw that away, because that's something we can lean into. But now we just create content that is edifying as well as educational, but also has an entertainment backing for our people.
Kembo na tata Nzambi. You see, Banabeto, it doesn't matter where you start. A small step, a small seed grows into something. Bantu kings and kings doing amazing things on the continent. How long shall you stand aside and look? My king, I'm sure this is something you have explored. Been in Botswana. We have the Bangoni there. Children of the South. Yaounde, if you prefer. Their spirituality and what is mainstream. Perhaps a few similarities, differences, comments. We are open to learning, my king.
Well, one of the things about when we have there's so many different tribes, right? In Botswana. It really, because of the migration, Botswana kind of became this integral part where you're bringing people from Congo, and they're passing through, Zambia down into Botswana and then filtering into South Africa and into Namibia. And then you have the people in Namibia and also, so Botswana is this, I think it has here just in Botswana, I think it has up to 12 or 13 different tribes. It's probably closer to 12, but they have so many different things. But one of the things that they still practice, even when you're reading scriptures, they still practice circumcision, that's a big thing, which, in all of the kind of Bantu cultures, that's the rite of passage, is that the area of circumcision, which you don't even have to get far into the scriptures to see the circumcision be represented in the scriptures, which is something that they don't even talk about in Christianity, right? So, they have rituals, they still are very ritualistic. They have the ritual for Pula, which they call rain or water here, Pula. That's also the name of their currency is Pula. So they have dances for that. They still in these cultures, their women they still want them to wear dresses, that kind of modest apparel, so there's a lot of these very, very similar things that you look at in scriptures that then for me, when I came over, I was like, and they're not even that far away. It's like they can be an hour outside of Gaborone, which is the capital of Botswana, which is where I live. And then where we have land is about 40 minutes outside of the capital city. And so one of the great things about being able to see is that no matter what the government has tried to do to try to bring them in to this westernized society, they refuse. Even when the government is saying we're going to just take more of the land and allow less land for you guys to hunt on, they still would rather, it's still in their mind and in their spirit to say, we would rather die by still continuing our culture than to submit and try to go into your culture just because you have decided that it's better for us, and that is a big thing with our people that I think a lot of us could really adopt more of. So many of us are so desperate to go into the future that we feel like we have to do away with the things of the past, when there's a world where you can have both of those things, but that's one of the great things about learning from a lot of these cultures here, is that they are still very, very strong, spiritually very strong. And they are so committed to who they are, and they know who they are. So because they know who they are, they're less easy, they're not as easy to be able to elicit things from. And I think that's a very, very beautiful thing, and something that I personally learned by being here in the country of Botswana.
Kembo. Talking of the people of Botswana, the reception, how has it been? Do they see you as one of them, or do you feel like you need to work extra hard to fit in?
It's a great question. The people in Botswana are very, very welcoming, very, very nice people. But the interesting thing about Botswana is because the population is very small. There's only about 2.5 million people, maybe 2.3 million people in the whole country. And here in Gaborone, it might be less than 1 million people that are in the capital. And so they have benefited from a different type of lifestyle, a different way of thinking. For example, they were never colonialized in their mind because they were a British protectorate, which is what I would just call like colonialist, like a more positive colonialist like situation. But they have free healthcare, they have free education. The government will pay for them all the way up through university. So I think one of the things that hit me when I first got here was I'm very, very fast paced. I'm very kind of business oriented, very business driven, and they're more laid back because the way that they kind of move about is very different. And that was something that really shocked me in the beginning, especially when I started making partnerships. So I was like, okay, guys, like we got to go. And they're just kind of like, we'll get there when we get there. And it's, we always have tomorrow. And so it's a process where you're accepted, but you're accepted at the appearance level. But then when you're obviously talking about your ideology, a lot of people are still very heavily into Christianity, and things like that. We go to these yaya's houses and they still have a white Jesus hanging in their homes all the way out in the village, which is like, but you have to respect them at whatever they decide to do. So that is, I think for me, that's been the biggest adjustment, has just been more of the pace, but they're very, very welcoming. I mean, they will, if you get a flat tire, they will instantaneously stop and help you. If you need something, they'll instantly give it to you. So that's a beautiful thing that we don't really have in the West anymore.
Now, the presence of the Mundele, we have to talk about it. It's a reality. So from your assessment on the ground.
Yes. There's a hefty presence here. And I think, if you're coming from the diaspora, it's expected, like it's weird and unfamiliar if you don't have a heavy presence. But then when you come here, there's this mindset when you're coming from the West back to the homeland that you would see it almost diminish or almost be non-existent. And it's very, very prevalent. And one of the things that's very frustrating for just me personally is seeing how much business they have, how many businesses they have, and they still do live on the fat of the land. They still have, the best parts of where everybody wants to come. When they come to Botswana, they own those places. There's a place here called Kasane, which is in northern Botswana, which covers at the north. There's this place called the Kazungula Bridge that they just built that connects Zimbabwe, Namibia, as well as Zambia. And Kasane is right there. But all of the lodges that are right there on the Chobe River, they own, right? All of the businesses there, they own. Even here in Gaborone, they own them. And the Kari and Pemba as well. It's like they just own. And so one of the frustrating things still, it's just very, very frustrating. Every time you walk into a shop, it's very, very rare that it's going to be owned by a Botswana. It's very, very rare. It's always going to be these other nations that are employing, whether it be the malls, and they have 10 malls within maybe like a 15-minute radius of each other. Like it's absurd, and so, but what the Botswana own, they maybe own a little textile shop or maybe a little spice area, but even that, they're renting it from the other nations. So there is a very, very big presence here that we need more people in all. And I'm not even talking about just in Botswana. I'm sure it's like that in Kenya and places. It's like that obviously in South Africa and Angola. So we really need more of our people to wake up and come back and fight this other battle, not just on the spiritual battle, but also on the economic battle, so that our people can get a stronger foothold on our land, on the land of our inheritance.
Kembo, you talk of coming back. Before we get to the cream of this setting, say Abana Vilaka is in the diaspora. They want to come to Botswana. The starter pack. I
think the best thing to do it is whenever any African country, but I'll speak specifically to Botswana, understand where you are going to be. You know, for instance, when I first got here, I found an Airbnb. I was like, oh, this Airbnb looks really nice. I'll just stay here. And then, you know, when I'm looking and, you know, and I finally get there and I'm driving past the city and I'm like, okay, wow, look, there's the malls and there's this. And then we're driving in the bush and we're going deep into the bush. And I'm like, the city's way back there. And it's like, oh, this is your Airbnb. And so when you look at it on the map, it doesn't look that far until you realize that you have to walk this every day. And you're going through the bush and it's hot here in Botswana. It's like, it's hot, you know? So I would first respectfully suggest that everyone understand geographic locations. You know, 10 minutes is a different 10 minutes than it would be in the West. It's very, very different, especially because you don't have a car when you get to a lot of these countries, most of these countries. And then secondly, I would also then say, understand what you're coming to look for. Botswana is a very interesting place, as in, this is just me personally, I think it's still looking for its identity. Like it's still trying to figure out what it wants to be. So you're not necessarily overwhelmed with this like African culture, if you will. You walk down the street and everyone is wearing westernized clothes. You know, there's malls, there's this, that, and the third. And for many people, that's a good thing. You know, maybe some people are like, oh, they don't want that giant transition. So I would honestly say if you're transitioning from the West, a place like Botswana is probably a really good place for you if you don't want that sticker shock of like, oh my gosh, look at all the people and I'm overwhelmed and this, that, and the third. But you know, the beautiful thing about here is the pace. The people are very, very nice. They're very, very welcoming. But they're craving education. They're craving they're craving to be taught. They want to learn. And one thing I always say is that for people that were born on the continent, you were able to keep your spirituality for the most part. So it's like the people on the continent have their spirituality and the people in the West kind of have the technology. And so now we need to begin to merge those two to become one, which would then be that representation of the two sticks. And when those things happen, then you have what they try to make movies about. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. You hear that, Banabeto, son of Muntu, has gone to the land of his ancestors, has gone to the land of his fathers. He has brought back a good report. So now, I know this was a bit short notice, so I'll try not to keep you. Now, this is, I think, the creme de la creme of why I invite everybody here. It's to address Banabeto, because you are in this Bantu tree. You have come to the realization of who you are. Mm. The question Ungubani becomes no stranger to you. So my king, address the kings and queens.
You know, one of the things about being in this truth is you're always learning. You know, you are always learning, and we have great teachers that are still teaching among us that you need to cleave onto. And we're in this time where you have to have a great level of discernment in your spirit. You have to really cleave on to Tatanzambi because you're hearing so many different voices, and a lot of these voices are pulling you in a different thing. But I would submit to all of our kings and queens that are listening that you can't lose by coming home. You can't lose by doing that. You will only lose if you come home thinking that it's going to be where you were leaving. So if you come here with a very westernized beast system, colonialized mindset, you'll be very, very disappointed because it's not that. And that is not a bad thing. This is kind of like a blank canvas right now. Like I was saying at other times, right now, to me, where we are in this awakening, we're going through the spiritual wilderness where we've all identified that we want to leave Egypt. We want to leave this system. We're tired of this oppression, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And now we're kind of going to this wilderness where now we're being told to return. And so some people, just like our ancestors did in the wilderness, they will leave. And then they will look around and they'll go, I kind of miss this that was happening in Egypt. And I kind of miss that. And some of them will turn back and some of them will break off into different factions and say, look, you guys keep heading south this way. We kind of want to go over this way. And we kind of want to go that way. And so you have to really find your grounding and understand why you are coming back, because you just wanting to return back to the homeland is not going to be enough to keep you. You have to come with great purpose, because the Most High has instilled in us great purpose. He's instilled in us a great gift. And so we must hone in on that gift. We must nurture that gift, and then we must use that gift to help our people. That's why he said that there's only a remnant. We know that there will only be a remnant, for many are called but few are chosen, because you have to be in the right mindset. You have to be in the right state of mind, not only physically but spiritually, to be able to tap into Tatanzami and to the Moanda and Semi and to our ancestors, the Nkulu Kulu. We have to be able to tap into them to be able to understand, overstand, and try to stand what it is that Tatanzambi is wanting us to do. And that's how we know that faith without works is dead. Many of us are continuously saying, I want to return to the land and I want to do this, but you're not doing it. And there's only a time where you become the parable of the 10 talents, where the Most High will say, look, I gave you a gift. I gave you a talent, but because you didn't want to move, I'm going to have to take that gift away from you and give it to somebody else. And so what I would just submit to all of us that are listening, that take the time to listen, is that understand what your gift is and figure out where it is that you want to place that gift. And don't look at it through purely the I want to make millions of dollars mindset. Look at it for how will this be beneficial to Isolele, to the Bena Congo? How will this be better? Because the Most High is going to bless you no matter what you do, as long as your heart is in the right place.
You heard it from Abana Bilak. A son of Muntu returned to the land of his ancestors. There is your takeaway, Banabeto. They told it to you in Christianity. Faith without action is dead. You're believing in Tatanzam. You're believing in Sonini and in Isomana. You're claiming allegiance to Ngai Murungu Mwenenyaga. Yet he has told you, in the land he gave your fathers. He did not give your fathers Babylon. And we continue to ask you, Ungubani, who are you? Know thyself. Connect with Zambia Mpungu. Connect with Banabet. Connect with your ancestors. Ngomisiani, Nkulu, for they never died.
No.
They continue to influence this realm. Ask Yesaya Congo. He conversed with those that were said to be dead. If you wish to argue, go argue with the demons of the Mundele. But if you wish to know the truth, that is the truth, and nothing but the truth. My king, perhaps a closing statement. You know, you're very active on social media, a watchman on different platforms, spreading this truth. It's very important for Banabeto to connect. You have projects, and that is why we are calling on Banabeto to reach out. We're going to give them contact information, because it's very important that we work together by the power of one. We also at Bantu Re-Education TV are wishing to partner with all those that are of one mind. We warn you, this is not a financial enterprise. We are only interested in the restoration of the kingdom of Tatanzambi, Yamazulu, Mpungu Tulendo. If you wish to partner with us, go to the website, bantureeducationtv.org. And if you wish to work with my king, who is doing amazing things in Botswana, this is how you reach him.
Yes, thank you again for having me. It's been it's an honor and a pleasure, and I'm humbled. You know, may the Most High continue to increase you and bless you. according to all of your great works. Yes, you can. I'm not on YouTube. You know, it just was never a platform that I really was able to get into, if you will. So I'm on social media. It's just at Denim Richards on Twitter, Instagram, on Facebook, but mainly I use my Twitter and my Instagram to, you know, feed. I also do on Twitter, I also do spaces, which is kind of like educational. You know, you can go in, you can have a whole thing. So I usually do spaces on Twitter, usually on like Wednesdays and Sunday evenings, where we talk about, you know, using things in scriptures and talk about them in today's society to really feed our sheep. And as Isaiah said, if you love me, feed my sheep. And this is what we need to do. My last comment really would be that, you know, we need to really find our gift and use our gift. The Most High has given us so much beauty, so much talent, and not everything is a money-making mechanism. We all have different gifts. Some of you have financial opportunities that you can help. Some of you have spiritual opportunities that you can get into. Others have teaching, and there's so many different levels in the kingdom, but they're all important. Not everyone needs to be the one that's sitting on the throne wearing the crown, for we're all kings. We're all royalty in our own units. And I think as we depart from this, that one of the things that will destroy us is that feeling where we can't unify. And that is a very colonialist mindset where we're still not trusting our king and our queen to do that which they've said that they're going to do. So when you have things like Bantu Re-Education TV that is going and spreading out the word, you have other channels, right? Like Mikhail Massa, Yaya Jonathan, you know, you have, you know, these other channels that are talking. We all need to be held accountable continually to make sure that when we have these platforms that we are doing that which we also say that we want to do, because we need to unify. We have to do it. And it's hard. It's hard when we've grown up in a system that has taught us that that's the opposite of what we want to do. But if we believe in Tatanzambi Yamazulu, we have to do that which he said and has ordained for us to do, which is to merge those two sticks. He never said it was going to be easy. He never said that we were not going to have to humble ourselves. He never said that there would be a perfect circumstance. He just said that this must happen. And we know that he is a Yah that cannot tell a lie. So we must begin to operate in his promise and deliver on what he has promised us, because he's promised us here, but we have to do the work in order to unearth the gifts and the blessings that he has bestowed upon the Benakongo in Geta.
Makubenjalo, thy Radhayangai, thy. To you, Bana Bilaka, we wish you a joyous evening ahead. Timan, the one, the only, son of Muntu, Denim Richards. Knowledge he has been given, understanding he has been given, the compilation for wisdom, for the fear of Tatanzambi, Mpungu Tulendo Yamazulu, Sonini na nini Somandla, Ngai Murungu, Mwenenyaga, is truly the beginning of wisdom. Until next time, Bayete, my kings and queens.